Hi, everyone. Welcome all of you once again to our series of expert interviews called Financially Speaking, highlighting core aspects of fintech and finance with established individuals who have carved their own niches, making the world of fintech and finance work for them. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by John Jordan. John is the executive director of the British Columbia Digital Trust Service and of the TOIP Foundation. He is an experienced product executive and technology strategist who has over 25 years of experience in both private and public sectors. John has extensive experience in delivering products leveraging open standards and open source software. Prior to joining the government of British Columbia, he led the implementation of buyandsell.gc.ca, the Government of Canada's procurement service, which is built entirely using open source software including Drupal, MySQL, NGINX, and Solar. Currently, he leads the province of British Columbia's participation in the establishment of a trust layer for the internet. This includes leading teams who have been making significant contributions to the open source Hyperledger Aries and indie projects since the fall of 2017. He also leads the Trust over IP Foundation, which is defining a complete interoperable architecture for digital trust. In this capacity, he provides direction to over 150 companies and organizations working together to make services, transactions, and relationships better by using verifiable credentials. In the late 1990s, John's master's research focused on the use of open source software development and distribution as an emerging dominant design, something which has come to pass. Thank you so much, John, for the amazing work that you've done so far in your career and for building this interesting set of trust for the internet, which we are particularly very passionate about, and so delighted to be a part of the TOIP Foundation. And this is an opportunity to highlight the amazing work that the foundation is trying to achieve. Could you please tell us something about your life and career that has shaped your role as a leading voice in verifiable credentials?
Well, thanks so much. Really happy to be here, and I guess I would answer that in part because of the that rather lengthy introduction about me. It's a little embarrassing, but I guess my whole career really I've been involved around software and software that helps both private and public sector companies do business or deliver services to citizens, and all of that requires interoperability and standards to work. We're talking right now over a global communications network that is based on open standards, the TCP/IP protocols and so forth. And so I've been involved in these kinds of efforts since a very long time. And when I saw the new model that was emerging in 2016 or so, that we discovered this term verifiable credentials, I felt like this could be the answer we're looking for to be able to deliver services to businesses and citizens in a safe, trustworthy way that we've been missing so far on the internet. So I'm hopeful that I can contribute to that.
Thank you so much, John, for the incredible work. What we are very curious to know is, what inspired you to bring together the group that launched Trust over IP?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we got involved in this kind of work, specifically verifiable credentials and so forth in 2016, 2017. And we realized, we saw the potential, there to solve really hard problems that governments have been trying to solve for decades. How do we help our citizens and businesses do business? And as we got more familiar with the technology and how it worked, we started to realize that that the conversations that were happening were really happening amongst a decent sized group and a really excellent set of groups, colleagues involved in W3C, involved in Decentralized Identity Foundation, involved in Hyperledger, and so forth. But by and large, I think we could characterize ourselves as leaning heavily towards the technology. And being in government and being a person that was working with the BC Registries team, who are the entity that creates legal entities, other than humans, corporations, nonprofits, cooperatives, and so forth. I was very heavily grounded in how do we solve problems for real citizens and businesses out there, not just the technology. And so a number of us in the community were together. This just wasn't my idea. We were like, we need to grow the tent here. We need a place where business people, non-technical people, people who are concerned with how do we organize communities to be able to establish trust. We realized there was a big missing gap, which was how do we bring the human aspects of trust along with the technology? And that was what inspired us to launch Trust Over IP. And it started in May 2020, I guess. And we had 29 members, and now we're over 200. And I think we're starting to see some good momentum in that front. And we've added new companies and members that have never involved in these discussions before in any of those other forums. So that I'm quite happy about.
And what tremendous progress in less than a year. And what I personally feel is that giving that opportunity to companies who were not in the space is so fundamental, because that's how the learning will grow. So a major challenge, John, we face is simply proving who we are in the digital world. In India, we have the Aadhaar, but that is so misused sometimes because there's a lot of fake data that sort of floats around. How do you think Trust Over IP will help people create trusted relationships and transactions online? How do you think that will envision and unfold
Right.
in coming years?
Well, I think I mentioned a little bit about the idea of bringing more people into the tent and just having this conversation. I mean, how important trust is to our respective communities. I like financial community is often given as an example. Like just yesterday, I was looking at a demonstration where a Canadian bank and the government of Canada and some provinces were looking at how to open a bank account online and do that completely without having to have an in-person visit. That's simply not possible today, especially for a business. You have to go in and show articles of incorporation and so forth. So Trust Over IP is about bringing together, the people who can think that through. And like I also mentioned, the Trust Over IP Foundation is kind of founded around a model. We call it the Trust Over IP stack, but really it's a model for understanding how can we assemble both the human side of trust and the technical side of trust so that we can have a holistic approach to establishing digital trust online. And it's not, that's a lot of fancy words, but really what it means is on the technical side, we need a trustworthy way to create a package of data. We call them verifiable credentials. And we send them over some mechanism to the other side that we're trying to communicate with. So it might be my brother, it might be my government, it might be my bank, it might be another company I'm doing business with. And we need to do that in a way that is essentially confidential. I need to create a channel to that other side that isn't intermediated by some third party logins. It's not known that it exists. It's confidential, and also that the content of the conversation, so it could be a verifiable credential, but frankly, it could be a text message or any kind of other protocol that's happening through that private channel, that's confidential as well. And when you have a whole bunch of confidential conversations, then you can call that privacy, right? So, so the Trust Over IP Foundation is about making that clear and understanding that it's not just a technical problem, it's also what are the rules and processes that create those things? So for example, when I have a government ID, what that means is that, we trust it because the government has gone through some sort of trustworthy process, a rigorous process to ensure that you are who you say you are, that this is your name, date of birth, and so forth, that there's not two people wandering around with the name Neha that have the same date of birth. In BC, for example, we do facial recognition to make sure there's no two faces with the same set of identity attributes. And all of that process, which is backed by law, results in the outcome of an identity document. And that identity document could be physical document today that has a lot of protection and so forth on. But we think verifiable credentials may be a very good way to bring this digital trust onto the internet. And so that's kind of meandering a little bit, but the idea here is that it's the bringing together of the two, the governance processes and the digital capabilities that allow us to have the overall view of digital trust. And finally, it's not for the Trust Over IP Foundation to decide on those rules or whatever. It's for each government, each trust community, financial community, the medical community, the supply chain community for cars or whatever it is, to decide on their rules, but they need rules. And they often exist, but the technology side of the world has often just kind of missed that, like they've left that out. And we've ended up in a situation, some unfortunate behaviors that are going on sort of on a global level that we never intended for, when the web was kind of early days. So that's what we're trying to bring to light.
That's very important, because what we notice here in India as well, John, is that there are actually two different phases of development. While the government is trying to incentivize such kind of, creations, innovation through hackathons and all these enterprise architecture strategies, there's still a gap in structured framework. There's a lot of people trying to build, companies on the basis of decentralized identities and verifiable credentials, but because of lack of framework and, the way it's not really being adopted, and there's not really a lot of knowledge about that space again.
Yeah.
How do you think, TOIP can help in providing this complementary framework, which can help companies innovate in a good way, rather than just copying from each other across geographies? How can TOIP help provide that framework, which is so important for innovation?
In order to innovate, we need some things to be made clear for us. So actually having a framework, having standards, having protocols that are known and understood reduces the uncertainty that companies face when they go to deliver a product. So, for example, when we make helmets for bicycles or motorcycles or whatever, they're usually certified by a national certification that says, yep, this helmet meets certain minimum standards in terms of safety for a crash or so forth. And that means that manufacturers can know, okay, I know exactly what I'm trying to meet here in terms of the safety standards. I can focus on, new materials to do that. I can focus on design. I can do a lot of new things now and not have to worry about these basic sort of safety standards. And it's a similar idea with the Trust Over IP framework, which is like, if you're going to build digital systems that need trust, and I'm going to suggest that almost everything needs trust at some level, and that the current trust model on the internet is really, if you have a credit card, you can participate. So you can buy shoes or whatever, and you can have your data mined so that advertising revenue can be siphoned off. But there's really actually almost no business going on the internet. Like, think about how many contracts there are in the world, happening every day between people and businesses and so forth. That's the market we think is open and addressable. And so, in fact, if we can come up with standard ways of doing digital trust with standard open protocols that allow the exchange of, for example, verifiable credentials, which can contain anything, like a contract, like identity information, like a financial transaction, so forth, then that's the business model. And we actually want people to copy that. So we hope that there's copycat in that sense, because if we add that certainty around how to deliver bits across the the TCP/IP internet, then we can actually open up a humongous new market for businesses and people to have new software or add things to their software that allow them to issue and verify these verifiable credentials. And I think that's the innovation we're looking for, we're hoping for, and and we're trying to help the market and the world sort of move towards that direction.
So that's important to, highlight, because there is so much that the world of verifiable credentials has. It could be smart contracts, like you mentioned. It could be, identities, digital identities. The number one challenge we face, John, here in India is when you say blockchain, people think cryptocurrency and nothing beyond that. So, what do you think? What are the resources which are accessible at TOIP to help educate people about nuanced blockchain technologies beyond cryptocurrency? Because that is just one part of the whole stack. So, what are the resources that TOIP has?
Yeah, I think, well, the frank truth is that that's an area that we're working on right now, is getting more and more, communications materials and education materials. But would encourage people to come to the website and get connected to the wiki. That's where our working groups are actually doing their work. The way the project is structured is we have working groups, which is where we focus our energy. So we have working groups both on the governance side of the stack and on the technology side of the stack. So people can decide to get involved in what they would like to get involved with. That's also another way, and our preferred way for people to learn, is to actually jump in and participate and help us shape this. It's not like we're coming to the market with like a baked solution. No, we're trying to attract the brightest people in the world and the most energetic people in the world to participate in shaping how the internet can become a trusted way of doing business and a safe place for you to do things and not have the worries of identity theft and so forth. Blockchain is kind of like a very small part of the story in a certain sense. Like, depending on the technologies that people choose to use, there may be a blockchain involved, there may not be. That's kind of a technology choice. And again, that relates to how you want to govern certain things and how you want to mix the technology and the governance aspects of trust for your systems. So it's really much more about this higher level idea of digital trust and how do you exchange data in trustworthy ways.
So, John, how do you envision the future for TOIP and its members in the coming year? What progress are you hoping to make? What are the things that are in your mind which you hope to accomplish in the coming year?
Right. I think we mentioned one, which is we really need to work on getting more material out there that helps explain this kind of stuff in a clear way. We've been working with a professional in information design and sociological research to bring out some graphics and communications materials that'll hopefully help with clarifying the mission and the components and how you get involved. Another project that or global initiative we're getting involved with is the Good Health Pass Collaborative, which is a group of organizations that have said, hey, there's all these health pass ideas floating around the world, for this pandemic that we're in. And we think that there's going to be digital and paper ways to prove that you're vaccinated, and this is going to be important in some way. And all that is uncertain right now. We're not sure. But if it does happen, let's do it in a way that's hopefully quote unquote good. It respects the confidentiality and privacy I mentioned. It's open standards based and so forth. We don't want a giant database in the sky of the entire planet's populations and their vaccination status. That sounds like, well, impossible, but as an exaggerated idea. That's an initiative that we look like we'll be quite closely involved with, and bringing our members' expertise to bear on the components of the blueprint for the Good Health Pass. So we think that's going to be an important thing. And of course, focusing on delivering some of our standards and specifications around governance and technology is going to be a huge focus. So we have a lot of work to do. Join Trust Over IP and help us get it done.
Thank you, John. And you already touched base on the COVID vaccine passports, but I would still pose this question and try to find out that if there was one area that needs to be transformed right now with verifiable credentials, do you have another area other than the COVID passports? What area could that
Oh,
be which could absolutely leverage from the technology and the governance framework?
sure. And I think I'll take that example. It's closely related, but it's more foundational. In lots of parts of the world, and I can't say all, but lots of parts of the world, governments are actually the foundation of trust for business, for example, and for how we govern the people in our countries and jurisdictions. So we have government issued identity. We have business registration. So you don't exist as a company unless your government says you exist. And we also have land registration. And those three registries are the underpinning of the economy, essentially. That's how we govern, that's how we do business. Contract law doesn't exist without the idea of Corporations Act or those kinds of constructs in your government. And so I think, and as a person who works for the public service, and I work closely with the registries and the identity teams here and so forth, we need governments to get involved and to step up and to do their job and to provide their citizens with trustworthy, privacy respecting digital versions of their identity documents, of their legal documents for corporations and nonprofits and so forth, so that we can actually do business, on the internet, and we can conduct our, I like to say, like, we can live, work, and play safely on the internet with the same kinds of protections that we generally seem to enjoy in the real world. We can walk generally safely down the streets and so forth, because there's a rule of law and a certain code of conduct that people generally respect. And we don't have that on the internet. And we don't have that in large part because we haven't had the means to do that so far technically. But now that I think that's emerging, we need governments to step in and lend their role to this transformation.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing such brilliant thoughts, John. All this insight comes from years of experience and, of course, knowledge that you harbor along the way. So what is that one book or something that you must have read along the line, which has, sort of inspired your journey and your work in this field? And, what continues to inspire you? Of course, we all have our bad days, but there are some thoughts and some nice, quotations, books, which continue to inspire us as we go ahead in this journey.
I think if I was going to say that, I would say, I think about, to get all of this done, you need people, good people to do it, to do the work, to work with. And I've been, hugely grateful and privileged to work with great people throughout my career. And the team that I'm working with now, and my colleagues in the BC government, and my colleagues in these communities that we're involved with are really great. And I think that teams and good people are really what I find most inspiring. And I guess if in terms of a book, I don't read a lot of business books because I find them, they're just not very substantial, but there was one that I quite liked. It was a book called Good to Great, and it had real research behind it. And one of the things that it said was, get good people on the bus and then figure out where to go. And of course, our, Steve Jobs, who has so many great quotes, he's like, you don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. You hire smart people so they can tell you what to do. And I feel like that is something that I've been keeping in my mind, like there's so many people around me that are so clever and thoughtful and hardworking. And, all I do is try to create the conditions where they can actually, let that out, like let that loose. And when you do that, really great things happen. And I hope that I can keep doing that for the next little while.
Well, thank you for, bringing back memories of Good to Great by James Collins. So that's a phenomenal read.
Yeah.
I read it in my postgrad. It was amazing. So thank you so much for the incredible work that you're doing, John, with Trust Over IP. We hope to make more contributions to the space, now that we're learning a little
Great.
bit more about the foundation, and try to get more members into the Trust Over IP Foundation and do things which actually have impact, so that there's knowledge which is going in and impact that is coming out. So, but nevertheless, thank you so much for setting this up, for the amazing foundation and for the great work that you do. It was such a pleasure having a chance to speak with you.
Well, thanks very much. And hope you and your family are well, and best wishes to everybody in India listening. So have a great day.
Thank you.